lately you've been using this term, a new mood, to describe the new blocks or the changing trends in geopolitics. So I think it would be helpful if you can demarcate historically what were the big blocks that were created from capitalism and socialism, who were the key players, and then what is the new mood, where are these blocks heading now?
It's a very interesting moment we're living in. We, let's say, when the Soviet Union collapsed, it looked like there was going to be one sort of center of the world, the United States, with its principal allies in Europe, and the rest of the world was, like the planets going around the sun, would just be paying obeisance to the United States as the central figure in the solar system. But I think, like with many things, contradictions set in. And also maybe a little bit of arrogance of private property, because capital decided, well, hey, listen, why should we pay high wages and high costs in the US and in Europe? Let's move our industrial base to Mexico, to Asia. Let's take advantage of cheaper workers and let's get them to build infrastructure and so on. Let's subcontract everything. And that's what they did. But they didn't pay attention to the fact that in doing that, some of these countries, China in the lead, said that you can have market access if you exchange technology. And they said, fine, arrogantly, this is how we build solar panels. This is how we build high-speed rail. And then the Chinese, decided, well, we know how to do this as well, and decided to build their own. And this was not just China. This is Vietnam, Bangladesh, India, Indonesia. These countries start innovating. And in India, where the situation of workers is much more difficult than in China, because in China, because of the Mao reforms, workers are generally better educated, better fed, they have better access to water, they get sick less often. In India, the working class is less educated, is prone to sickness because of waterborne diseases, because the water supply is very poor where workers live and so on. So you don't have the kind of productivity. But even in India, despite that, there's been immense gains in Indian capitalism, immense gains. And so the center of gravity of world capitalism production moves from the Atlantic to Asia. And the biggest, most dynamic economies over the last 10 years have all been in Asia. And I mentioned all of them. And what that has done is something extraordinary, because at the same time as this dynamism has shifted to Asia, the Western economies have had a serious collapse. From the 2007 financial crisis onward, they've been spluttering, unable to have a growth rate anywhere in the vicinity of 1-2%, some of them, just spluttering at zero, whereas these countries in Asia growing 5, 6, 7, 8%. And so these countries in Europe no longer are the market for even Asian products. And Asian economies then turn to Africa, Latin America, and that's the birth of the BRICS bloc. The BRICS bloc is born through, in a sense, commercial imperatives, that there's all this production happening in China, India, Indonesia, and they're not going to be able to sell this stuff to Europe and the United States anymore. These places just can't absorb it, so they're looking for new markets. That was the origin of the BRICS. And as the southern world begins to essentially become vital, they stop being reliant on the West. No longer are they reliant on the International Monetary Fund or reliant on the US Treasury Department. They can do their own thing. They're trading in their own currencies. Marco Rubio, the new US Secretary of State, was on television about a year ago where he said, look, one of the worst things about de-dollarization, or that people are using their own currencies, is we can't sanction them. We don't have tools to punish them. That's Marco Rubio saying that, yeah? So the new mood emerges out of that. It's a political mood. It's what enables countries to say, look, we can't tolerate this genocide against the Palestinians. That's why, so many countries of the South backed South Africa's claim in the International Court of Justice. Colombia, Bolivia, Mexico standing up to the United States, India refusing to stop buying oil from Russia. Very interesting development. Indonesia saying that they will refuse to sell unprocessed nickel. This is a big pushback against Australian mining companies, Canadian mining companies. This is the new mood. These countries just saying, listen, master, you're no longer my master. I think this is pretty extraordinary. I mean, speaking of an end to civility, remember what we started with, Babuji Makhan, looking down. That attitude is going away. I find that extremely, extremely filled with purpose.